So how are you doing, Josephine?
I'm doing good. And how are you today?
I am doing good as well.
Ah,
So today we wanted to talk about James in the Bible.
yeah, James in the Bible, but which James are you talking about? Because I know that we have like four James in the Bible. Which
That's
one?
right. I think we want
Yeah.
to talk about James, the brother of Jesus.
Ah, okay.
So let us open Acts chapter 15.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's read from verse 1 on so we get the full context here, so we understand what it's about.
Oh,
I don't know, do you have a Bible with you or shall I read?
just read,
Okay.
because
So it says here, and a certain man which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, Except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved.
mm-hmm.
When therefore Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about this question. And being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenice and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles, and they caused great joy unto all the brethren. And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them. But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed, saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. And the apostles and elders came together for to consider of this matter. And when there had been much disputing, Peter rose up and said unto them, Men and brethren, ye know how that a good while ago God made choice among us, that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And God, which knoweth the hearts, bare them witness, giving them the Holy Ghost, even as he did unto us, and put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Now therefore why tempt ye God to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? But we believe that through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ we shall be saved, even as they. Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. And after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles, to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, After this I will return, and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruin thereof, and I will set it up, that the residue of man might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who does all these things. Known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which from among the Gentiles are turned to God, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. For Moses of old time hath in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day.
So,
Okay, so we can see, so that was James speaking, that the brother of Jesus.
so
So
to I would like to know how was James related to Jesus, and in which chapter do we find that James was the brother of Jesus?
well, this is like, first of all, what we find in the book of Acts is that this James basically said was a person
Mm-hmm.
that was having the last word, right? So he made the decision after there was a dispute, and he was the one who actually could make the final decision. So he was in the early church the most important person. And we know from other sources, that he was also called James the Righteous, and he's also
Yeah.
known as James, the brother of Jesus. So we find it in the letters. If you open the Galatians in the first chapter,
Uh-huh.
right?
Galatians 1:19.
Says, but other of the apostles saw I none save James, the Lord's brother.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And there's also somewhere Acts chapter 12, verse 17.
But he beckoning unto them with the hand to hold their peace, declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison, and said, go shew these things unto James and to the brethren. Yes, that's right. That's the first mentioning of James, the brother of Jesus, in the book of Acts. So Peter, when he came out of prison, felt it very important to tell it, to let his brothers, also Jesus' brothers, know that he came out of prison. So that's there we can see that we also find that, of course, in the Gospels itself, we see that he is named amongst the brothers of Jesus. So if you look into, let me see, here in Mark, if you go look in Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 3, it says here, is not this a carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and of Judah and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? So we can clearly see here his brothers are listed, So he had 4 brothers, James, Joseph, Judah, and Simon.
Did James initially believe in Jesus as the Messiah? Did he believe that Jesus was the Messiah?
Well, no, they didn't. Which is kind of surprising, because it said somewhere that they did not believe in him.
Why didn't he believe that Jesus was
Why
the
did they
Messiah?
not believe that he's the Messiah?
Yeah.
Because at that time, I guess he hasn't done yet what a Messiah is supposed to do. You see, that I think is a problem with Christianity, that we are so disconnected from the way Jews actually think about a Messiah. Because in Jewish terminology, what is a Messiah? A Messiah is somebody who is anointed to be the king of Israel. David was like a Messiah. He was anointed and he was the king of Israel,
Yeah.
And what Israel was looking for at the time of Jesus, because during their time, they had nobody on the throne of David. Because at that time, Herod was king. When Jesus was born, there was the king Herod.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a Jew. He was an Idumean. Also, he converted to Judaism. But he wasn't a proper Jew. And he definitely was not of the lineage of David. So there was this kind of anticipation in Israel that one day somebody of the lineage of David would occupy the throne. So any male person in the lineage of David could have been the Messiah.
Okay.
See, it was not a supernatural role. They were not looking for a supernatural person, as Christians often think. They were just looking for somebody that would rise up, and take the throne and possibly fight off the Romans to free Israel from Roman occupation. So that was kind of the idea about the Messiah. And that still is kind of the idea of a Messiah today in Judaism.
Okay.
We have kind of cut off the meaning of the Messiah from its original meaning. The word Messiah or Christ is a Greek, Christos, is a Greek word for Messiah or Mashiach.
Yeah.
And Messiah just means the anointed one. A priest could also be a Messiah, because a priest also was anointed. So Messiah doesn't have to do miracles. He doesn't have to do any of these things. The only expectation of a Messiah was that he becomes a king, that he rules in Israel, and that he will fight off all the enemies, so that Israel would become again an independent nation. Because that's what they were looking for, because when Jesus was born, they were oppressed by the Romans.
Okay. So even after the resurrection of Jesus, he still did not believe that he was the Messiah, or after the resurrection, he believed he was the Messiah.
Well, what happened was, when Jesus started his ministry, some people started to believe that Jesus was going to be that king that was going to take the throne. Okay? Many believed that Jesus was going to be the Messiah. And they expected him, to come to Jerusalem. And when he's in Jerusalem, that he will fight the Romans and occupy the throne. So that was the kind of idea that they had about what the Messiah was supposed to do. And then Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, to fulfill that prophecy about, the Messiah comes, meek and mild on the donkey.
Yeah.
And then, but what happened instead, instead of him taking the throne, he was betrayed. Judas betrayed Jesus. So he never managed, to occupy the throne, but instead, he was crucified. That's the story as we know it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then what happened after his resurrection, or after he died on the cross, and people believed he rose after 3 days. That's when the idea came that he was not just a Messiah who just becomes like a king who sits on the throne, and rules, but that he becomes more like a spiritual Messiah who has a spiritual kingdom. So what was before thought to be a physical kingdom, the kingdom of Israel,
Yeah.
became later a spiritual kingdom, a kingdom basically that's inside of us. And that's why sometimes, we see differences in the Gospels as well. In one Gospel you read, for example, blessed are the poor, but later you read in Matthew's Gospel, blessed are the poor in spirit.
Yeah.
You see, what was just blessed are the poor turned suddenly into blessed are the poor in spirit. So everything was spiritualized later on.
Okay.
But there is this kind of question, because once Jesus died, then his brother James, or Jacob, he became the leader of that movement.
Oh, he was a very devoted follower after the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Yes, the thing is, there is a question whether James, if he was a disciple of Jesus or not, because there are several James in the Bible.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So there's two James. There's two James as disciples, and there is a theory that was proposed by Robert Eisenman. He was a professor who did an intensive study on that, and he said that it's possible that one of these James of the disciples actually was James, the brother of Jesus. So that James actually was also a disciple of Jesus. So later he accepted that Jesus was the Messiah.
Okay. Okay. So my next question is, what is James known for writing in the Bible?
Well, we have the letter of James.
Uh-huh.
Although we don't know if James has written it or not. It is widely believed nowadays that it was written later by somebody else in his name. But it is very Jameson. It is really in the how shall I say, in the vein of what James could have written, right? So it could have been written by James, or it was maybe written by a disciple or of James, who later wrote it. And we can see that he addresses a lot of things that Paul has written. There's this idea about, where Paul speaks about, that we are not saved by works, but by faith.
Yeah.
Without the works of the law. And James seems to respond to that, and he seems to say, no, we are not saved by faith alone, but by works. Yeah. So James emphasizes the works a lot. He says it's important not to just to say believe, but your faith has to be accompanied by doing good works.
Okay.
He says, when you see somebody who is on the streets, he's freezing and he's hungry, it's not just enough to say or go, be blessed, but you have to do something. You have to clothe them. You have to feed the hungry. You cannot just say, oh, I believe in God, and that's all there is. Even the devils believe in God, right? That does not differentiate you from anything.
Yeah.
But if you want to follow God, you have to do what God tells you to do.
So in short, in his books, he emphasizes faith accompanied by good works. That is what you're trying to say.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
And we do know from the Gospel that he was a very strong proponent of the Torah. So for example, if you go back to the book of Acts, if you open Acts 21, so here it says, if you read from verse 17 on, it says, and when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present. So you see, again, James is mentioned first here.
Yeah.
And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the custom. What is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this, that we say to thee, we have 4 men which have a vow on them. Them take and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. You see? So I should really get another translation. When I read it with the thys and thous,
Yeah,
it must be very
that is
difficult
the
to.
King James Bible.
Yeah, the King James Bible. Unfortunately, I only have the King James one here in
Okay.
English
I
on
also have the
my
King
phone.
James. Okay, so
I told you I should have taken my Bible with me, but yeah, I should next time. I have to get my Bible, the other one. And but anyway, what we see here is that James says that he's zealous of the law. You see, if you see that
he
in
was,
verse 20, yeah.
yeah. So character-wise, James was a leader. That is what you're trying to
Yes, he
say.
was a leader of the Jerusalem church, so that is the first Christian movement.
Yeah.
And it really shows that the early Christians still followed the law. They still followed the Torah. Yeah. And interesting is because Paul is challenged here. He's being said, we have heard that you're preaching apostasy, that you're preaching the Jews not to keep the Torah anymore,
Yeah.
that you teach them not to circumcise their children and not to follow their customs. Yeah. So he says here in verse 21,
Yeah.
says, and they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. So from that one we can clearly see that the Jerusalem church still circumcised their children, and they still followed the commandments of the Torah.
Yeah.
Now they're speaking about
According
that about the Jews here, not about the Gentiles, right? Because you have to be careful, because he says, and they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews,
Yeah, the Jewish
which
law
are among the Gentiles, to forsake Moses.
also fighting.
So
So
it's not about him teaching the Gentiles,
so
but he should not teach the Jews not to circumcise.
okay. So he was a leader who upheld the Jewish law while also guiding early Christians. He was doing both.
Yes, I mean Paul, according to the book of Acts, still followed the Jewish law.
Okay.
He still followed the Torah. But that is where the conflict comes, because some passages in his letter seem to imply he doesn't. So that is what causes a kind of a controversy, and that's where this accusation comes from, where it says, what are you doing, Paul? Are you teaching Jews not to circumcise your children? Are you teaching them not to follow the Torah? And we don't see actually what Paul was answering here, because his answer is not recorded. But there's an instruction given to him, and it says, what is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come, that you have come. Yeah. Let's get rid of this thous and thines here. So basically they're saying we have to do something about it, because people are losing faith in you, Paul. You have to show them that you also follow the Torah. So here we tell you what you should do. And they say, do therefore this, what we say to you. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Now this is it's very likely a Nazarite vow. A Nazarite vow, where they shave their heads and then make a sacrifice. And we read that, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Oh.
There's, take them and purify yourself with them and be at charges with them or be alongside with them. I'm not sure what charges means myself here either. Here. I think it be with them, that they may shave their heads. So he says, okay, yeah, so this is a group of 4 men. They make a purification vow and or be at charges. I think it means he should pay for them to shave their heads. Yeah. And all may know that those things of which they were informed or what they have heard about you concerning you, they are nothing, but that yourself also are walking orderly and that you keep the law, that you keep the Torah. So they were very much concerned about Paul. Who is this guy, Paul? Who's going about amongst the Gentiles? He's teaching, about Jesus, but is he actually keeping the Torah? Is he doing the things the right way? So there's a kind of a concern that Paul might be teaching things that the church in Jerusalem would think that it's not right, that it's wrong. Yeah? And they asked Paul, therefore, to prove to them, and to not only to them, but to everybody, to show that they can see that he still follows the Torah. Right?
Okay. So
We can see, for Paul is doing this, he is actually agreeing, and he is doing this, and he's also paying for the sacrifice. And because we can see that in verse 26, it says, then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. So this is an animal sacrifice,
yeah.
which also tells us that the early church still believed in animal sacrifices. And that is, for many Christians, a problem, because many Christians believe that Jesus was the last sacrifice and that Christians would not have sacrificed because Jesus would be the fulfillment, and because with Jesus as a perfect sacrifice, there would be no more animal sacrifices required.
Yeah.
But here we can see that in the early church, they still did animal sacrifices.
Yeah. So
So,
okay, my other question, I don't know if it's written in the Bible or not. Or how did James die according to the Bible and according to tradition? Is it written in the Bible?
okay,
Really?
we don't have, there's nothing recorded in the Bible about James,
His
at
death.
least not right as we can see. But it's interesting that Robert Eisenman, he thinks that when we read about Stephen, the Bible, we read about Stephen being stoned to death.
Yeah.
That could be maybe a veiled way of actually speaking about James being stoned.
So
Because we know from other Gospels and other letters that James was stoned. So in the Bible himself, we have no direct reference about James being stoned. He's hardly mentioned at all, right?
yeah.
In a way, he's actually kind of written out of the Bible. Even though he was the most important person during that time, we do know from other Gospels who mention James, they say like that, as a Christian, you should follow James. And you also know from Josephus, he's a historian of the time. He writes about the stoning of James. Let me see if I can find a reference to that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one it's in book 20, chapter 9 of the Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, which was written around about 93 to 94 after Christ. Yeah. It is one of the most historically significant non-Christian references to Jesus and his family. And there it says, and so he convened the judges of the Sanhedrin and brought before them the brother of Jesus, the one called Christ, whose name was James, and certain others, and accusing them of having transgressed the law, delivered them up to be stoned. It's basically, the account describes how Ananus, the high priest, took advantage of a political transition between Roman governors to execute James and others without proper authority. Josephus notes that many in Jerusalem were outraged by this act, and Ananus was eventually removed from office by King Agrippa as a result. That showed that James had a huge popularity amongst the Jews. So he was very popular.
Yeah.
And when the high priest Ananus had him stoned, it caused a huge outrage, and Ananus was actually disposed from his office because of that.
So as we are looking for other passages, maybe we can also tackle why James sometimes was called James the Just.
James the Just, yeah. Hang on. He's called James the Just, that's right.
Yeah, James the Just.
For instance, okay, there's, for example, here's another passage that we find in Hegesippus, which is quoted by Eusebius.
Yeah.
Eusebius was the church historian during Constantine. So he worked at the court of Constantine. Yeah. And he wrote a huge history on the church. And he also quotes here from Hegesippus. And here says, so it's basically in Ecclesiastical History, Book 2, Chapter 23. He says, they led him to the pinnacle of the temple and demanded that he renounce Jesus. When he refused, they threw him down and then stoned him. Finally, a fuller struck him on the head with a club. They basically, there's a longer story about that where he was asked, come on, go up to the pinnacle of the temple and speak from there so everybody can see you. And then somebody pushed him down from the pinnacle so he fell to the ground, right?
Oh, okay.
And when he was on the ground, they stoned him and somebody came with a fuller stick and then they bashed basically his head in. He says, this version combines stoning with a fall from the temple and a final blow, more dramatic than Josephus' account. It portrays James as a martyr for his faith in Jesus, revered even by non-Christians until his death. Then we also have Clement of Alexandria, also via Eusebius. Yeah. He says, Clement reportedly said James was called the Just because of his virtue and that he was elected Bishop of Jerusalem.
Okay.
While Clement doesn't detail the stoning, his testimony supports the idea that James was a central figure in the early church and died violently. Yeah. And then we have the Gospel according to the Hebrews, like a fragment which we got from the church father Jerome. And there it says, Jerome in De Viris Illustribus mentioned that James swore not to eat or drink until he saw Jesus risen. He also refers to James' martyrdom, though not with specific details about stoning. There's also something about in the Clementines. I see if I can find that. Yeah, here recognitions. Here's a quote from Recognitions of Clement, Book 1, Chapter 66. It says, James, the brother of the Lord, who, as there is no doubt, received the episcopate of Jerusalem from the Lord himself and from the apostles, and who lived so holy a life that he was called the Just by all men. And it says, this passage emphasizes James' spiritual authority and his reputation for righteousness. He is portrayed as a legitimate leader of the Jerusalem church appointed directly by Jesus and the apostles.
So Jesus was the one who appointed him.
Jesus himself appointed him, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's this Clementine Homilies, Homily 11, Chapter 35. It says, and when he, also James, was found teaching in the temple, the people rushed upon him and threw him down from the steps and beat him to death with clubs. Yeah. This dramatic account of James' martyrdom echoes the version found in Hegesippus and Eusebius, portraying him as a Torah faithful teacher who was violently rejected by opponents. Then we have the Epistle of Peter to James, introductory letter in the Homilies. It says, to James, the Lord and Bishop of the Holy Church, under the Father of all, through Jesus Christ, wishes peace always. This letter frames James as a central figure of authority in the early church, even above Peter in some respects. It reflects a Jewish Christian perspective, where James is a guardian of Torah fidelity and spiritual purity. So there's a lot more actually if you look deeper into it, right? But we can see from that alone, that James was a central figure in the early church history, and in the book of Acts, even though he is kind of pushed to the background, but even in the book of Acts, we still see that he was a leader of the church, that he was a person who made the decisions. And then we also have later records of the sons of one of his brothers that were interviewed by Roman authorities. So we know that it's kind of, how shall I say, like, in a way it's like a dynasty. First you had Jesus to be the Messiah who would take the throne. And when Jesus died, then James, the next in line, was his brother, James. And when James died, the next brother took on the leadership, which was Simon, And so basically, so the leadership went from one family member to the next in the same way as it is in royal family even today. Like, for example, when Queen Elizabeth died, her son became the heir to the throne.
Yeah.
And if a son would die, then the brother would become the heir. So they would always stay within the family. And that is in a similar way with Jesus. Because the promise was made to David and to Solomon, there would always be somebody who would be on the throne of the lineage of David. Yeah. That's why it was so important that the Messiah had to be of the lineage of David, because that was a promise given to the Messiah.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's this kind of very strong family connection.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for letting us know who James was, how he died, his characters, why his name was James the Just, how he was related to Jesus. We appreciate everything that you taught us today.